I'd like to call to order the 2019 budget presentation meeting for Thursday, November 29th of 2018. So if we could please all stand for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please be seated. Thank you. So, obviously tonight we're here to discuss the 2019 budget, and I would also like to welcome the CLA students that we have that are interested in learning about council and how we operate and the different various departments on how they operate as well. And I thank you for taking a vested interest in Norristown to see how your community works and operates. And if we could have you after class, after the course is over, to sign up for committees, volunteer for committees, that would be excellent. So again, thank you. So now I'll hand it off to Mr. Jones.
So again, thank you. Did you get that?
Great opener, man.
I always have theme music whenever.
Please make sure phones are
I
off.
apologize.
My ears.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So again, thank you, Council. This is, as President Sanders referenced, this is a budget presentation following the 3 sessions of public input that we've had. We had one session of public input this afternoon at 1. Yesterday we had a 6 p.m. and a 1 p.m. Session to satisfy our requirement to have 3 opportunities to give public input at this stage of the process. As you are aware, we did have a session with council on Monday night. So for the sake of not being too repetitive, I'm not necessarily intending to go as great detail as we went through Monday night, since we have had extensive conversation with council. After this presentation, we'll take whatever additional input from council that council has to offer, and then whatever additional public input tonight on comments. And again, all of that will be incorporated in this process. After which, we will then, beginning tomorrow, post this document publicly for the next 10 days. In order to give the public opportunities to comment in various ways. Certainly, there's going to be written comment. They can come here. They can call and make comment. We're actually going to put together a Survey Monkey to make comment. There's going to be an email opportunity to make comment to email at info.norristown.org. So we're going to collect public comment over the course of that time from every source that we know available. Going to make this information available at the library as well, so that folks can either come here, go there in person if they want to have any questions. We will take all of that input in and be processing that input for a discussion with council on December 10th, at which time we will ask council to consider a first reading of a proposed budget to you, at which time if council authorizes the first reading of that budget, we will advertise that budget from December 10th through December 18th, when council has its next workshop meeting, and we're scheduling, per our earlier discussions with council, for December 18th adoption of the budget. As you also know, in terms of the budgeting process, once the budget actually has been advertised, an ordinance has been advertised, we cannot increase the budget, the proposed budget. You can't reduce it. based on any input that you take in, but you cannot increase the budget. And so that's where we are tonight, and as we had shared with council also earlier, again, echoing Madam President, this is kind of a 2-for-1 night, so you bought one and got one free in terms of both the council meeting and the CLA. So hopefully, as both residents and interested parties, CLA members and public comment part of this discussion, along with other residents, can ask questions as well and provide input that we'll capture as well. We also will be broadcasting this on our TV so that other folks who can't attend will see it. So as we shared earlier, quickly what our budget trend had been over the last several years, and basically our proposed budgets, as expected, have been incrementally going up. The challenge that we had, particularly in that 2014 to 2017 period, was that budget was going up, but we maintained the same millage rate. A lot of that was around council's desire of not really having an adverse impact on residents because millage was being increased in other places. Last year, we really, because we didn't have a choice, there was a two mil increase in the budget in our millage rate, which resulted in about a 15.5% millage rate increase. Even given that increase, we still had to rely, as council is aware, of almost $1 million in our fund balance to actually balance the budget. So basically, we had to borrow from our savings account, as we did throughout that entire period, to balance the budget. And the concern, you can go to the next slide, Brandon, always has been, well, I'm sorry, go back. The concern has always been that you can only go so much in terms of eating your savings account where you don't have any more savings account, and that becomes catastrophic. One of the things I want to point out also is that when we first presented this budget to council, it was actually $203,000, $448 higher than the budget we got now. We have been, throughout this process, screening and rescreening and straining, trying to find ways to reduce our costs and our operations so as much as possible to try to narrow that gap between revenues and expenditures, a gap that we, like every other municipality, has to deal with. Okay. So pretty much this is just the breakdown of how our 2019 budget looks in terms of where that money is being spent. You know, it's police, it's all of the departments. You'll look. I think the unusual things for the municipality in terms of what you see as far as categories for expenditures, it's always typical that your police is going to be the larger part of your budget. Most of the time it's the largest operation. In our instance, it's the largest departments of police, public works, fire department in terms of staffing codes, etc. The most unusual things for us happen to be in pension, insurance pension costs, and in debt service. We have as you know, a $4 million debt service that we have steadily been paying down. So a $4 million annual debt service that we've been steadily paying down, and we continue to do that. Most of that debt service is around the refinancing in order to try to cover pension deficits several years back, and we're still doing that. The insurance cost is just the cost of providing for pensions as per contracts with the 5 unions we negotiate, at least 4 of the unions we negotiate, and also providing for things like property liability, etc. One of the things you find that's unusual about Norristown, particularly in the property and liability insurance, as with everybody, it's based on experiences, and we've had over the years some experiences that have caused underwriting agencies to pretty much charge us a lot. We're not the worst, by any stretch of the imagination, because there are some local governments in Pennsylvania and other places where they have to self-insure because nobody will underwrite them. So we are being underwritten, and the things we're doing actually in terms of safety committees and how we operate policies you've adopted, et cetera, have been able to drive those costs down to some degree and actually still let us be attractive enough to at least a couple of providers where they actually will offer us insurance. And we go through brokers to do that, so we go through a large screening of various sources to come up with what we come up with. Next. So this is just really another way to show where all of those expenditures for go and compare that to how we did last year. So if you look at, again, the overall operating budget, it's only a 1% increase in our budget, 1.7% increase in our budget from last year to this year. And that's been pretty consistent, particularly among the operating side of our budget. I mean, council is very aware, you were very much involved in pretty much us going through a process that began probably 3-4 years ago at least, of let's look at eliminating every unnecessary type of thing that may be doing it, that if there was fat in the budget, I don't know where it is, and you'll see that our operating costs pretty much are similar from year to year. I think there are a few items on here I'll show you to point out in terms of larger costs. You see the recreation piece is a 16.3% change. Well, as you know, we did acquire the former PAL building as our rec facility. But most of the cost associated with that change actually is just a shift in some utility costs that were associated with recreation. When I got here, recreation was a sub-department within the Public Works Department, and some of those costs never came out. And one of the things we're trying to do is make sure that as we evaluate how we are spending and performing in departments, that we actually put the costs associated with those departments in there. Some of it is the fact that now, for instance, we'll have a light bill and a gas bill and et cetera associated with that department because it's now a rec department cost. Code enforcement, one of the things that we're looking at in code enforcement, I know one of them is training and development. As you all know, Mr. Singh has been very, very aggressive in terms of trying to bring our code enforcement operations and staff up and getting some training and much needed training and consistent training for all the staff. But the other piece is supporting council's directive that we be a little bit more aggressive in trying to deal with dilapidated properties and unsafe property. So typically we put about $50,000 a year into abatement of problem properties. A lot of times when we come across issues that have to be dealt with from a health safety standpoint, et cetera, and particularly when we can't track down the owner at a particular point in time, we get it done for us and either bill them or lien them depending on the situation. And so, there are a number of properties, and what we were requesting in this budget is that at your direction, let us be more aggressive in kind of cleaning up the town and dealing with problem properties. So we put, I think it was around $20-something thousand additional into that line item. So that's what makes it jump. We looked at, you see a 3.5% increase in public works. Well, one of the things we're dealing with in public works is, stormwater issues. In public works, that's what we see all over town. A lot of times people see depressions in the road and think it's really about the road. A lot of times what that is about stormwater and what's happening underneath the road. One of the things that council, you've been involved in discussions, and we're investigating and are going to be discussing in detail in the first quarter of next year is the possibility of implementation of a stormwater utility. Because basically we're having to deal with stormwater issues, and it's coming against a budget you have for public works that wasn't prepared for stormwater issues. And by going to a utility, we look at grant opportunities and other opportunities once you have a stormwater utility in place. And it's also a much fairer way in the city, particularly that has a ton of nonprofit entities, a much fairer way to distribute the cost of doing that to everybody who has an impact on stormwater in the city. So those are really the bigger drivers related to cost for 2018. But the other part of that, and the largest part of that, I forgot to add, has to do with, again, contracted personnel costs in terms of salaries that are negotiated and the benefits that go along with those salaries that are negotiated. So that's really the biggest driver of that additional $569,000.
I'm sorry, Mr. Gensby,
Mhm.
can we go back
Sure.
further, please? Could you explain to the public what the negative 1.5% is for fire?
Yeah, that's actually a reduction in their operating costs, and so we wanted to identify that. Brandon, and where I can't specifically remember that line item, but that negative number reflects there's actually a reduction in costs and operations related to that department. I know we're retiring some equipment in the course of this year. We got a new fire equipment coming in as well. And I do recall that some of what we don't anticipate doing is a lot of the repair we had to do on the aging equipment, because we have equipment, some of it's 25, 27, et cetera, years old. And so I know we took off the fact in most areas, why we were able to keep the budget as flat as we could. In most areas, when it came to equipment, we were able to look at, well, we shouldn't have to anticipate this many repairs, because we've got new fire vehicles, we've got new codes vehicles, we've got new police vehicles, et cetera. So that's why that reduction is that much like.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this kind of reiterates what I said. Personnel costs, as you see, 47% of that increase. Salaries is of that 270. 158 of it is salaries, and it's related mainly to contracted salaries. We got insurance costs, again, increased by $100,000, and that's particularly in the property and liability side of it. And I'll tell you, one of the things that folks will say about insurance, and I think this is good for public consumption as well. A lot of people think, well, what is it that's Norristown doing that would actually cause your property insurance to have, the liability insurance to go up? Well, we all know that per our ordinance, this responsibility for dealing with sidewalk issues actually it falls on the property owner. And in one instance we had this year, that we had a property owner who actually had insurance, but it was underinsured. And a person got hurt on their sidewalk. And that person sued not only the owner, but they sued us. And we weren't a party to it, but the judge decided, well, yeah, you are a party to it, even though you regulate the sidewalks, but they didn't have the insurance. And in all honesty, that person had $500,000 in claim, basically because of surgery and plastic surgery that had to have happen. So even in talking with both our underwriters and talking with consultants about it, there's really nothing a municipality can do to prevent something like that from happening, because regardless of what happens, as you all know, as council members, you sat in an executive session enough, we get sued for everything, whether we're in it or not. And a lot of times what we find ourselves responding to is making folks understand we're not the suit party, the party that should be. And so much of the time they get it and they back off. So we're going to expect that folks will sue us, and again, while we didn't pay the $500,000 claim, our insurance company did. Well, then we got upside down as a result of that, because their loss ratio went to the negative in terms of covering us, and that experience is always going to impact what your insurance rates are.
Got a question, Chris?
Sir?
The contractual salary increases.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on what those contractual?
Yeah, we've got 5 actual labor unions that I negotiate with on behalf of the municipality. And those 5 unions, we enter into multi-year contracts for what salaries are gonna be, what benefits are gonna be for those. And so those contracts, signed, sealed, delivered, agreed upon, we plug in the numbers for what that means going forward. So that's basically what that is, you know, for most of the municipality, I'd say almost 90% of the municipality staff is contracted personnel. And so that's where the cost is. Thank you. Okay, so let's look at our revenue trends over the last few years. What we've seen is, again, not unusual for us. It's a little frustrating for us in some ways, is that revenue is declining. We projected in this current year that we would have a higher degree of revenue. We projected 33.8, almost $33.9 million in revenue. Revenue is not moving as we projected, particularly because you know, the thing for us is we know that there's a lot of development going on in town. We know that you know, assessments, there are some assessments that go down, reassessments of property that go down. We get those, we see those, we have to make adjustments for those, but we also see a few assessments go up. I know the school district does a great job in fighting the assessment reductions, and we've seen some success in that. So what we wanted to do, certainly is make sure that we are conservative in our estimate of what revenue is going to be in 2019. As council is also aware for public consumption, one of the other things, you know, as a result of a grant that we received from the National League of Cities, we've been working with the National Resource Network for the last year. They spent a great deal of time with council, a great deal of time with the advisory committee, a great deal of time with me and other staff, talking about what we're doing and talking about basically how do we get to sustainability, recognizing that in this reality of just local government period, not just Norristown, that you got to deal with the issue of declining revenues, and how do you get that? How do you bridge those gaps? What do you do about services in the face of that? So one of the things we want to do is make sure that we don't try to overestimate revenue. Now, if we get a great revenue surprise at the end of the year, you know, that'd be great. But looking at what the trends have been, we're proposing the 32.7 revenue projection for 2019. Given that, based on the expenses we have, we're anticipating about a 1.784 gap between what we're going to take in and what we're going to have to spend out to take care of that. Now, again, in line with the conversation we had with the National Resource Network on multiple occasions, we all recognize that probably, given that we're in the early stages of trying to get to this multi-year budgeting, multi-year forecasting goal that council wants us to get to, that this first year is going to be a big reliance, again, as it has been in the past, on fund balance to help bridge that gap. Again, last year there was an aggressive tax increase because we really didn't have a choice. It was either, but there was also still a use of $1 million in fund balance. So we were almost without that tax increase, we were going to be at a almost $3 million gap between what it was going to do to cover the difference between expenditures and revenue taken in. And if we don't address this, as you know, it's going to end up with the situation of starting to have those kind of concerns about services being cut, et cetera. And you know, we provide basic services. We're a full service city and provide basic services. So there's some difficult discussions that we would have to have and may have to have at some point in time. But we think the long-term projections say we know that as we continue to deal with our debt situation, that we're gonna get some relief there. But we also know that things like that broken pipe outside of the building and other kind of things happen in government, and you have to be prepared to accommodate that, and you have to have a fund balance where you prepare for the unexpected. So that's the deficit that we're looking between revenues and expenditures, that 1.7 that we're looking to cover. So again, when you look at where does Norristown get its money? Most of it, if you look at it, and 74% of it is taxes, whether they're property taxes, local enabling taxes is taxes, and then all the other categories we have various types of permitting, et cetera. One of the things I'll point out to you, and we're trying to deal with now, is it's in some areas where we have been really kind of weeding through the system to look at how we operate and what fees and fines, et cetera, we should be charging. And we're discovering that there's some we have adopted on the books that didn't get assessed. And so we've been looking at addressing that, and it's been a really, really deep dive into the budget for seeing where we can get revenues from. In our revenue meeting, we shared with council that there are a number of things we're trying to do now, and a number of things that are being proposed that we'll discuss that to help address that gap. Any questions? Yeah.
Yeah, so at our resource network, the baseline projection meeting we had, the presenter mentioned that we have fallen short with our earned income tax.
Right.
We should be technically increasing about 2%, but we're only collecting about 1%.
Yes, and part of what we're doing with that is working with the firm to actually go out now and do that assessment for us to try to capture that. I know there's been a lot of underreporting going on in terms of it. We don't, earned income tax really is actually the employers and supposedly on their form, just like on yours and mine. If you get a salary, they're supposed to report that information.
So we reported earlier this year that we do collect 97% of our earned income tax.
Yeah, it's just been, I think it's being underreported, and that's why we're actually going out now to do.
So would you say that we don't have a full grasp on our census and who's earning income in the community?
Well, census is one thing, but again, that's not a number that we actually go out and say we're going to find out who here is paying earned income tax. The way that works is if you get a salary, you're supposed to fill out your paperwork. You're supposed to say where you work. You're supposed to say where you live. That calculation is supposed to come back to us. And what we do with firms like Berkheimer, et cetera, is their job is to go out and make sure that that's happening. So we've been very much aggressive with them in let's identify that. Let's do more than we can. I think I forget the name of the firm we got, but we actually have a firm that's now working on our behalf to go out and track that information so that we can capture that. I know NRN in conjunction with our staff, they've actually been reaching out, and we've been having these conversations with Berkheimer about how to do a better job of capturing that information. Yes, ma'am.
So basically, based on what Hakeem was saying and what you're saying is, have we realized any increase in collection of earned income tax with this firm that you're talking about?
Yes, I mean, we know that we're capturing stuff that we haven't captured before. We'll have a better idea. As you know, we're finishing audit now. And so we'll have a better idea. I think we're scheduled to get our audit report tomorrow. And then we're gonna have the auditors come in and talk to you. So we'll have a better idea of how we're tracking that. But the job of the firm is to go out and identify where where businesses are, et cetera, in town, whether or not they're underreporting in terms of the people who are working in town, et cetera.
So at this point, you don't have an idea of what kind of a percentage of increase?
Not yet, and that's why I didn't want to project a number that ultimately was not a real number. So again, our goal is to be extremely conservative.
So what if they're paid under the table?
Well, you know, we don't have the opportunity or the time to do the under the table check. What we hope is that folks who do know will let us know, and that's what we can do. Now, when we identify like firms and groups that we're changing and they're going in and making the request for records and whatever, there's going to be the ability to do that. But for instance, if they're small mom and pop shops, we're not going to waste our time going after that. You know, we would want to go after larger things where we know there's going to be a capture that's going to be impactful to the organization.
It's not just Norristown businesses.
Oh, no.
It's everywhere.
Yes.
So if somebody works, like for example, I used to work in Malvern,
Mm.
my earned income tax was set here because it was different than that, or it was actually more than
Right.
what the privilege tax was to work in Malvern or East Whiteman Township. So the difference was, I guess the difference was sent here, or?
Yeah, there's a portion that gets sent here and there's a portion that gets sent where you live.
Right.
Absolutely.
So I am assuming that firm is looking at employment outside of the municipality that would be responsible for keeping those records and following.
And that's Berkheimer's job, and what's the other firm? I can't remember his name, but that's their job, and we're connected with them. They're the keepers of those records, and it's us going with them and saying, let's look at what it is you have on record that's coming in Norristown from whatever place it is. But it ultimately is going to come down to, you know, it's not going to be as easy for us to go to a business outside of Norristown and say, hey, are you paying businesses in Norristown? But if we got residents with Norristown addresses that we know that we're supposed to have an EIT, that's that point of entry that starts putting the tentacles out. Yes, ma'am.
So for the purposes of estimating revenue in this budget, are we using the NRN's 1% number here, or 2%, or how do we figure that out this year?
Well, we're using the 1% number because, again, we don't know what that monster looks like. I'm between here, and that's why we're really trying to get to this audit number, these final audit numbers, because they'll show us what 2017 actually looked like compared to what we have on the book. And so we're going to follow that trend as closely, so it might be 1.4, it might be a little bit different. But again, my approach to budget is uber conservative because I don't want to overestimate a lot in terms of what's on the table. Very good. Okay. So again, here you have a look at what we did, what we're looking at in terms of revenues. What we adopted, again, in revenues is that 33.8, 32.7 is what we see as preliminarily. We know that for 2019. Now, we know also that between here and the end of the year, particularly in taxes, a lot of folks are going to come in and beat that 1231 date, and that happens every year. We expect that to be consistent, so I think we were, 97.2 is our number that usually has been coming out. I think we were below that 97.2 thus far, but we're looking that it's gonna, normally, December is a big month when folks are gonna come in and make those final tax payments. So these numbers, as we get in, all the information we're gonna get in the next few days, by the time we get to you with a final recommended projection for budget and revenues, it's going to reflect everything we've gathered to that point.
A question.
Yes.
Can you explain why the property taxes is estimated to be, I know it's small, but 0.5% difference?
Yes. Because our overall valuation went down. Our assessed value of property, of all the property in the town went down, which was, like I said earlier, I referenced earlier, very frustrating when we know that there are properties and projects being developed in town and you would expect that there'll be a slight increase. But the value of our mill, and we'll talk about that, last year I think the value of our mill was, might have been 880, well, I'm getting years there, but it might have been like 879. I think it's now 875,000 in terms of and we'll have that up a little bit later. But it's really what our tax rate is going to be based on is the valuation of our property in the municipality. So even though if we went with those same, if we went to that same 14.7 millage rate that we have now, it's going to generate less dollars this year because the value is calculated against went down, and that's why it's a slight decrease. Okay, so we did also talk about, and we've been talking about that since throughout this whole year in terms of the NRN piece, et cetera. Where can we look at being local government, opportunities for revenue generation to meet that gap? One was, and it's a big one for us, was, and we talked about with council was, using the payments in lieu of taxes, since we have, 229 entities in town that are non-tax-paying entities in town, not counting certainly the county government and not counting the school district. So looking at that, we talked about revising our fee structure for several different areas of the government. And part of that, again, and we'll talk about it shortly, is not only the fact that some of our fees are just really, really outdated. Some of our fees have been on the books for years, but haven't been collected. Some of our fees just, aren't in line with the cost that it costs for staff to provide that fee. And so we have to be a little bit more realistic in understanding that nothing is free in terms of what we do. Just like any other entity, we're a corporate government entity, we have to be able to pay for the services that we provide. So we've got a number of things we'll talk about in terms of potential fees, Brandon. So I was talking about that payment in lieu of taxes. As you know, nonprofits don't have to pay taxes. So what we've been talking about, and we were going to do it, we were talking about doing it this year, and we didn't get a chance to do it because of some changes in our finance department. But is those 229 entities, their property that those 229 entities in town utilized are valued at $85,893,000, which would yield $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million in taxes, if we could tax those properties. Similarly, we know we're not taxing the county, we're not taxing the school district, but when you look at being a county seat and having as much nonprofit in town, in terms of our tax base, that's $2.2 million of taxes that we can't, potential tax that we can't capture. So one of the things that a lot of places are doing is implementing just a payment in lieu of taxes request of nonprofits, saying, look, we know you don't have to pay taxes and you're appealing to their goodwill, but anything you can contribute to the cost of the services that we provide to you would be appreciated. That letter is going to go out to those 229 nonprofits when we send out our tax bill as well, urging them to contribute to the cause. And as you all know, you hear a lot of them coming to you to contribute to their causes as well. But we don't discriminate in the service we provide, whether it's police, whether it's codes, whether it's public works. We don't discriminate in the service we provide to nonprofits. So if there's anything that we can gather, as we say in the country, it'll be gravy on the biscuit, and we'll be happy to get it, but we're not trying to anticipate that. You would know. Yeah, I thought you would know. But it'll be that, and we'll try. We're going to make the effort to see if we can get some contributions to the government.
Quick question.
Mm-hmm.
So if the county has only 20 properties and their assessed value is almost half of 229 properties, is the county exempt from?
Yeah, they're local government, I mean, they're county government, which is a form of local government, so they're exempt from taxes as well as school district. And bottom line, you know, local governments aren't gonna tax each other.
So what kind of impact do you see from their employees for, county services, courthouse, human services?
Well, we do for those properties, we plow their streets for them, we respond to incidents, we provide fire coverage, we do fire safety drills, we do pretty much the stuff we do for anybody else. I think one of the things that's happened, particularly over the last, I'd say last 4 or 5 years, is that, I remember some of my first meetings when I came on board in 2013. It didn't seem like and I think the word I got was the county's really not our friend. And for a number of reasons, but I can say, but certainly this administration and the past few administrations, there's been a lot more collaborative work between it. I know me, the president and she takes various members of council with her. We have quarterly sit-downs with them. There are things that they do as a result of those things in terms of, I know there used to be they used to give a pilot in lieu of it. And one of the things they did, they were having their own financial issues. So one of the things they did was try to privatize some of the properties they had so that we get the tax revenue from the properties to offset that. So, the collaboration goes on. I mean, we have some good conversations, and Madam President can attest. Some of them are strong, good conversations about, the county seat.
And their employees pay.
Yeah, their employees do pay EIT and all of that, yeah.
So between the 27, between school district and county, do you know how many of the, within many of those institutions, there are nonprofits within these institutions? If you're probably aware.
That you mean occupy their premises or something?
That they probably fall into that 229 total.
No, the county, that's the number of, 256 nonprofit entities
There
in
are
town.
Montgomery County agencies and school district agencies that also have nonprofits within their umbrella that fall under our zip code and our
Yeah,
jurisdiction.
well, and our interest in them really is
Which raises a lot
about
of
tax, property tax, and EIT. So, if they're here and they're working here and this is their work address, I'm confident that from a county standpoint and from a school district standpoint, as far as EIT and other ratables that we would collect automatically, that happens. As far as where folks eat and how they spend their money, not so much.
So, Mr. Jones, if we could go back to the collaboration you mentioned in regards to the relationship with the county. I know there's times more often than some that the sheriff's officers also help out the Norristown Police Department
Right.
in some instances.
Right, absolutely. I mean, the collaboration and with Sheriff's Department, with various, I have routine meetings with the COO about things. I mean, there's a quid pro quos in a lot of places in terms of the work we do. So it's not that we operate totally independently of each other. For instance, when snow plowing season comes in and stuff, they will lend resources to us to help do stuff. We will lend resources to them to help do stuff. So it's a collaborative effort, and so it's not. And I will say this: I think anybody who travels anywhere, where I know back from when I got here to now, the chair always talks about the focus being on doing things in Norristown, improving the county seat. One of the things, this whole campus project is about that. And I get an opportunity, quite honestly, to have to travel around because of the business I do as a manager, to be in the room with county commissioners a lot. And pretty much every time I'm doing it, there's a talk about how they have a focus on redevelopment in Norristown, because I think, I don't think, you look at it, this county seat doesn't look like a lot of other county seats around the state. Then it's not as built out, it's not as developed, and they seem to have a focus on doing that. And so it's a really collaborative relationship. up until including this whole new campus redevelopment, this new campus project, $300 million project they're doing. I mean, there are folks around this table, along with myself, along with Jane, we've been in the design discussions and in making sure that when they decided they were going to do that project, where the focus was going to be, because there was they were at least considering that the focus wasn't going to be on Main Street. It was actually going to be on Airy Street focus, and not so much on Main. They were also considering that it was going to be a much less focus, so in terms of a much less development. And so they got our input in that, and and our input was, no, we want you to focus on Main Street. We want to create a place for the municipality on Main Street. We want to make sure that this redevelopment of the park area and that whole hill area is something that's accessible and that's usable by Norristown for Norristown events, et cetera. And that is part of the design. I know the council members spent a lot of time with them as well, talking about making sure the facade and the look and the feel of the building is not this cold, stoic monster that sits in Norristown. I know in one of the most recent meetings, they went back to the drawing board after they brought us a look. They're like, this isn't what we said, and they actually went back to the drawing board and brought back what we said. And that was really directly conversations between the council president, council members, and the commissioners about making sure that it stay focused on being supportive of the vision that the council has for the community. Any other questions on this? All right, so here's some of the proposed fee changes, and some of this is small, but just kind of indicative of where we have issues where we do provide service, and it does cost money, and we're not capturing that cost. So things like block parties, it's a feel-good thing. It's a good thing, but block parties involve multiple departments having to mobilize to say it's okay for a block party to happen somewhere. So you're talking about my office, the police department, public works, and the fire department, all got to say grace on that. We have some rules in place that they're supposed to be, right now, 100% agreement among the folks who live on that block that party can happen. So we do the validation of trying to do that. We have to go and make sure it's cleaned up afterwards. We have to go and provide some materials for them to block off the road. That's cost involved in that. And so we know it's great, it feels good, but what we want to do is say, okay, let's capture that cost. And the other thing that we talk about is, a lot of these things are user fees. And so the fees aren't trying to be distributed to the whole municipality. It's like you want a specific use for your targeted purpose, do that. And I guess some of the analogy I give sometimes is, go to Chuck E. Cheese and say you want to have a party on their property, and you want to do it for free. They're gonna say no, you got to pay us. So that street cleaning, there's what happens if they don't do what they say. And there's been at least a couple of times in my 5 years now, well, I'm trying to help settle disputes about, I didn't sign that thing, somebody signed that petition on behalf of me. And I'm getting drawn into conversations that it's a block party. So there's a cost associated with that. We don't have a whole lot. It just seems like for us who have to be in it, when the season comes, there's a whole lot of discussion about it, and there's a whole lot to churn. So we're just trying to do, we looked at now, and this is just the administrative side of what it takes to do the application intake, to get it to validation that says, okay, you can go. That's the people time involved in it. That's not the time actually that's involved in, okay, let me go out and check to see if they cleaned up and did what they said to do. Let us go pick up whatever it is they left out there. A lot of times it's, if we give them tape is still laying out across the road because sometimes they walk away from it. So, you start thinking about it. That's gas, that's vehicles, that's people time being taken away from other duties to support an event for a specific thing. So we're proposing a non-refundable $50 per application fee to hold a block party on your street, and to shut down the street for you to do that. Again, compare that to the cost of Chuck E. Cheese, saying you can come and take their their room for however long you want to do it. So that's one fee that we're proposing. In public works, as we shared before, a lot of these fees like this one, they've been the same for years, but again, the cost of our gas, the cost of our time, it does go up. We've negotiated salary increases that are not reflected in the cost of doing this work. So we're not trying to gouge anybody, but we do these things. And you look at these street opening and utility poles. This is utility companies. This isn't typically people. So utility companies come and they want to do street openings. They want to do work on poles, and we've been charging these fees for quite some time. And we're just saying, hey, let's charge a more reasonable fee. So those fees are for those. Other fees that we have that have been on the book, and these are adopted, so we're not really, unless you want to decide to take them off the books as a part of your budget. Some of these fees are things we should have been charging for, and so you don't see a proposed fee under those contracted parking permits, et cetera. Those are things we just, as we started scrubbing this thing, why aren't we seeing this revenue on the books? And we're saying, oh, because we're not charging it. So we said it's an adopted council ordinance.
The utility pole fee, is that competitive with other municipalities? So
Yes.
utility companies are used to paying those
Mhm.
kinds of fees and things.
Yes,
And is there a possibility that if the fee is too high, that the utility company would not do work in a municipality?
No, and I'm going to tell you why. Because that's their customers that would, and your residents that wouldn't benefit from them, and that's ultimately them that would get the blowback for them not doing the work. Utility companies, they have a fee schedule, project schedules, and we work very, very closely with all of the utility, gas, electric, and water company. We work very, 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 very closely with, actually have a very good relationship. What ends up happening is, I know that, as I did this week, I'll get a call about a fee. Oh, well, we think you shouldn't pay that. And my thing is, I love this ordinance as I love most ordinances that involve fees. City manager doesn't have any authority to waive a fee, and I love that. I don't want that authority. I said, well, that's something you have to come before council, and council has to make that decision. And why would council want to curb a fee for you when they don't do it for residents? And most times you never hear from them because they don't want to take that on. But so now, honestly, the discussions we have with our PICO representatives, with our PA American Water representatives, they're used to this. I'm also used to the fact that, man, they're trying to strain their little budgets for every little project, and they're going to try to ask, can I waive this? And no, I can't. No, I don't have the authority to waive it. And they'll pretty much move on.
And the street banners, who is likely to pay that fee? Is that-
Well, people who ask us to put a banner across the street for their events, yeah,
They didn't have a fee.
yeah.
They did not
You're
have
right,
a fee.
but there's
That's
a
one
truck,
versus truck
Right.
versus-
yeah.
We're not talking
Right.
about the.
Even those though, on the little pole, the light pole banners, yeah, even those, because
Now, is
that's,
that $100 per banner or $100?
that's really about the big,
To that.
to do that.
So if they wanted to put those little flag things on utility, on the light poles.
Yeah.
On one block. or
Yeah, we
let's say
do
Main
that,
Street,
yeah, be $100.
That's $100.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it'll be
So
$100.
that's take it up, put it up as well as take it down.
Yes, that's, that's gas, people, materials involved with that, traffic control, everything here, yes.
So my concern is the dump trucks, and
Mhm.
some of the larger utility vehicles that do park, and I guess take up residential spaces. A lot of those companies or trucks are from outside companies.
Mhm.
So you got residents who don't have parking because an outside company uses our streets to park there. And the worker may take a truck home at the end of the day,
Right.
but I think they're just as liable to pay some type of fee for storing their vehicles overnight.
Well, I think again, as we've
And
had
I'm
this,
talking trailers.
Right.
That exceed our truck parking violations and things like that.
as we've had that discussion with Chief Talbot, but let him know.
Yeah.
If somebody reports it, we'll deal with it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, we see it.
Yeah,
I come home at night and I call.
yeah, And we'll deal with it. If they're parking where they shouldn't be parking, we'll deal with it. So it's a matter of letting us know.
And also, I know in the past, because of that was occurring, Chief Talbot, Mr. Benivo actually had the no truck parking signs
Mhm.
installed, because of that. So
Yeah.
if you happen to see an area where it's continuously reoccurring, then that may be an opportunity to have Thomas do some sort of study and then get a no truck parking sign there as well.
Yeah.
But
And
that,
begin to find them.
that doesn't have anything to do with the contractor for concurrence, right?
No,
It
no.
could become contract.
No, and that really does, if you got a part as a contractor to do something, we do want, your
So if I have a
occupied
contractor coming
parking.
to my house to fix my roof.
No, we're
You're
not.
gonna need to have a fee to park in front of my house to do that job?
Mhm.
Is that what that is?
Not that I'm aware, but I have to double check with that.
confused.
Not that I'm aware of that.
So can you explain the situation where a contractor would pay for a parking permit?
Well, let's see, if they're doing work where, I know where they're talking about, we're gonna have to block off the street and we're gonna have to take some parking spaces to do some work if we're going to impact traffic. We wanna, and you're gonna have long-term parking there. We want to actually do the application and do all of that work. If parking is a part of that, we're gonna charge you for parking. But let me.
Does that also include those dumpster thingies?
Yeah,
Yes.
Those, I think there's already a fee
Yes.
in place for
Oh.
those.
Yes.
There's already dumpsters, yeah, there's
So
already.
that's not included in this contractor parking.
No, there's already a separate dumpster
Roll off.
roll-off fee in the fee schedule.
Okay.
Yeah, so Thomas collects and make sure we collect those. One other thing I want to make sure I deal with is these last two. You have an agreement right now with Mascaro and whatever trash hauler you end up having an agreement with. They provide the service and whatever. But you also have, as a part of your ordinance, that anything beyond 4 units has to contract to have their own haulers. Well, we have the opportunity, and we think because of the impact they have on our roads, et cetera, that those non-haulers should pay some sort of fee for having the ability to be a hauling vendor in Norristown. So that's one of the fees that we're putting here, is that we do a private waste collection fee beyond that for any other hauler in town that's doing business in Norristown, and that's not unusual that other haulers get. And sometimes, as you know, this is the first city I've worked in. It's not unusual, but it's the first one I've worked in where the trash bill was a part of your tax bill. I managed cities where we had our own trash trash company and we managed it, or we actually had haulers who came in and who paid us fees to be haulers in our town. And then they dealt directly with residents and businesses themselves in terms of their customer service and their actual agreements for picking up service. So, but those other haulers are impacting our traffic. Some of them are running over our signs. Some of them are running over our curbs, and they get to come in and do it with no repercussions. So unless somebody catches them hitting something, they can let us know. So that's one of the other things that we're putting on the truck, and then have on the proposed schedule, and then having an annual license to do that business in town based on the number of trucks that you're gonna have in our town as well. So
I'm sorry to be so stupid on this.
no, you're stupid. Good person.
Contractor parking permit, that's per space. So for example, PAWC is right now on the 900 block of Sandwich Street.
Mhm.
They're taking up the whole street. So whatever number of parking spaces they are using for their trucks to do that work,
Right.
that would be $10 times that number of parking space
Right.
that they would be charged by the job.
Absolutely.
By
Absolutely,
the-
because what we do right now, for instance, when OJ trial came, and all of those trucks came,
Yeah.
we actually sat and negotiated.
Bill Cosby.
I don't know why I'm thinking OJ, I'm sorry. It's Bill Cosby.
I knew what he meant, but I
I had a 19 something flashback, so I'm sorry, I don't know what kind. See, it's been too long a day, I apologize. But when the Cosby trial came, we actually sat, we negotiated in advance with all of those news vans. Like, for all of these days you're gonna be here, you're gonna pay this to occupy all of those parking spaces. And so we do the same. If you're gonna use up parking spaces, there's revenue for us to have, you're gonna pay for those parking spaces, yeah. See, that was great, Kristen. I just blew it with the okay.
I can tell you what, though, I had a problem with that $10. If you are a resident and you're parked in that space, and that's right, how much is that parking fee?
If you're a
$20?
resident,
Yeah, if you go over your meter.
You're parked on the wrong side of the street.
That's what I'm saying. We're gonna charge $10, they can be there all day on that.
per space. Now, you look at,
So
you
if I
you
go
look
there and
at,
charge for a
But
meter.
if I go there and park and I miss my meter, and I'm missing
y'all can shoot me all kind of numbers y'all want to charge. I'm in the revenue generating business, but
I'm
that's
just
on
saying.
you all. But
I'm
but
just
we
saying,
know.
$10 is nothing.
Well, we know. Well, think about it from this
All those
perspective.
news vans take up 2 spaces.
Yeah, think about it from this perspective.
$10.
See, a parking ticket for violation is a punitive thing.
Yeah.
This is not a punitive piece. This is
generate
about
business.
the revenue that we would generate normally from a parking spot is
$10
X dollars a day.
I've got that
Right.
circle.
Okay, well, I'm gonna take whatever input council gives, and you know, y'all adopt. I just propose. But
present.
yes. So okay, you can go. So one of the other things that we talked about is just a small fee again for what we have to do in terms of doing murals, and an administrative fee if folks want to put up murals, because there's staff time involved in all of that. That's planning and development, review of that on multiple occasions. As your involvement in that and approving or disapproving murals and all of that. And so we wanted to charge a fee for that. Operational permits, and this is one of those areas where we found that already on the books, there have been a number of fire permits that have been adopted, and for some reason we weren't collecting. And so this is a part of your budget, your fee schedule already, but I wanted to point out to you that those are some of the things that we're gonna be aggressive about in making sure we do this. And so that's more for information and not a request, unless you all give me an indication you want to take stuff off. We're gonna just continue to include that, but I'll make sure that administratively it's captured in our finance department as a part of revenue we should be collecting. Okay, you know, every time we talk about codes, I bring up our new award-winning, TV recognized code enforcement manager, Mr. Amrinder Singh. Amrinder, come chat with them about code enforcement.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Yes.
So just like every other department, we looked at the current fee schedule that we have in place, and we took a strong look at it to see if it truly reflects the cost, the operational cost for the municipality to cover those services. One of the things that were concerning me were building permits. I'm proposing, if council agrees, that we have a special permit schedule for small residential and commercial projects that are valued under $5,500. And the reason why I chose that particular number is, after looking at our history of permits for the last 5 years, the statistics that we have are, for example, in 2018 year to date, we've issued 1,548 permits. That's building, mechanical, electrical, plumbing. Out of those, 1,146 or 74% were for projects valued at $5,500 and less. So almost 74% of the permits that come in, people are saying the cost of the project is $5,500 or less. A lot of these projects, when we go out there, we clearly see just the materials alone are worth $10,000. Or the type of work being performed, the labor alone might be $5,000. So because it's hard to enforce who is doing the work, if the materials truly are free or gifted or however they plan to do the work, one way to actually cover the cost of our permits, because for example, if somebody says the cost of the permit was $2,000, that permit fee is only $99.50. We might be going out there for 2 inspections, 3 inspections, and obviously it costs the municipality more than $99.50 to provide those services. So if we had a fee schedule that said if anyone is reporting that the work is under $5,500, what we're looking to do is currently the fee for any permit under our fee schedule is a $70 minimum. I want to increase that to $100, and then that $100 minimum fee will include 1 inspection. Let's say if additional inspections are required, depending on the type of the project that's taking place, you might need a framing, you might need a rough electrical, and then a final. So before we were doing 3 inspections for the price of $99.50, or doing 2 inspections for the price of $110, depending on what the valuation of the project was under that $5,500 limit. This way, we're actually going to be charging them for every time we have to go out. So whether they say it's going to cost them $3,000 or $1,000 or $5,000, we're actually going to capture revenue every time we go out there for the cost that it took for the municipality to provide those services. So we want to, the proposal is to increase that minimum fee from 70 to 100, which is a $30 increase. And that's going to be across the board, not just for the minor projects, but also for any new residential and construction activities. The administrative fee is currently $25, and we're not proposing an update for that. We're going to keep it the same. Another proposed fee update is for the re-inspections. Currently, we charge $30, and we are hoping to increase that to $50 to once again actually cover the true cost of doing all the administrative work and the field work to cover that re-inspection. And also, late last year, the state law was changed to make the required UCC state permit fee from $4 to $4.50. So we have been collecting that, but I just wanted officially on the new fee schedule that is what the UCC permit fee is. Now for new residential and commercial projects, what's going to happen is right now our fee schedule is structured from $0 to $2,000, which is at $99.50. I want to have that changed where if any project is less than $5,500, we're going to go by per inspection type required. And then if it's $5,501 to $50,000, all of the current fee schedule stays the same. So before that said $2,000 to $50,000, now it says $5,501 to $50,000. So the rest of the fee schedule we have, majority of the time, it does cover the cost, operational cost, the administrative time, and the field time to cover these building permits. So nothing else is going to change on that end, except for also the re-inspection fee, which currently is $30. We want to make $50. But the biggest item was the minor construction projects. Everyone comes in and my cousin's doing the work, I'm doing the work on the weekend, and it's going to cost me $4,000, but we get there, and obviously it's a substantial improvement that they're doing to their building. We're going out there 2, 3, 4 times, and we're only collecting $99.50 for that permit fee, and it's costing the municipality more money to provide these services. So this is going to help cover the actual operational cost that it takes us to provide these inspection services. The other item is if anyone gets caught working without the permit, we're going to be charging them double the fee as a penalty for trying to go around the system and doing work the correct way. Yes, Councilwoman.
The scenario that you brought up where somebody, a homeowner is gonna be doing work, and they're doing it on their own, and they've got a friend of them who may be in the business, what project value are you looking at? Because obviously, that project is probably only gonna be costing the materials. There's not gonna be any labor involved. So are you gonna be looking at the entire project as if labor were involved? Or are you saying, okay, well, this bathroom redo is gonna be X amount of dollars in materials, and that's what you're expecting the homeowner to provide to you? And is that what you're basing your fee on?
So that's a great question. Right now, it's in the gray area. So somebody, a homeowner might come in and say, I'm gonna rehab my bathroom, and I'm doing the work myself, and the materials are gonna cost $2,000. That's fine. It's gonna be a $99.50 permit fee. But for that bathroom rehab, we might be going out going out there 2 or 3 times to make sure that the work is done according to state code. Now, that homeowner could hire somebody and say, you know, I'm getting this work is being done at this property, and it still might cost $2,000 or $3,000. What the issue is, there's no way for us to truly enforce or regulate or really know what the actual cost of the job is. And that's what our fee schedule is determined by. So it's in the best interest of everybody to always underreport the cost of the project, where they might say, like you just mentioned, that they're gonna get their friend to help them do the work, or they have materials laying around from a previous rehab. And it's hard for us to determine if those are true facts or not, or if it's really gonna cost them to do this amount of work for that amount of cost. Now, there is one method that larger municipalities than us use. It's called like the building evaluation data. And what they do is they actually base that off of square footage of the renovation or the new construction. If we did it that way, our permit fees are gonna kind of be very large compared to our operational costs. So that's why I didn't propose that type of fee method, because then you literally will get charged almost $118 per square foot to do a renovation. Or if it's new construction, $135, depending on the type of project that's being constructed. And square footage wise, that permit fee adds up very quickly. So what we're concerned about is making sure that we cover our operational cost. And that's why we're looking to do this $5,500 capping pretty much. And because that's our most frequent application type, you know. 74% this year, and then for last year it was, let me see here. For last year it was 982 permits out of 1,306 permits, which was a little over 75% once again, that reported that the job cost is only going to be $5,500 or less.
So, let's say somebody comes in and says they wanna do a bathroom.
Sure.
How much would it cost them for a permit fee to get that bathroom done with the new proposed fees?
With the new proposed fee?
Mhm.
So depending on the actual renovation, if they're gonna completely gut everything out, they're gonna do new electrical wiring, they're gonna do rough electrical and plumbing and final. So what's gonna happen is you'll have a rough electrical for the new electrical work that's being done, you'll have a rough plumbing for the plumbing work, and then you'll have a final. So that's gonna be 3 inspections. So with this cost here, it's gonna be $100 for the minimum fee, $25 for the admin, and $4.50 for the state fee, which comes out to $129.50. Plus, that only covered 1 inspection, so now we're talking about 2 additional inspections, so that's gonna be $150 on top of it. So it'll be $129.50 plus $75 for the rough electrical, $75 for the final, if we include the plumbing, rough plumbing with the $129.50. So each inspection will be $75, each inspection type.
Okay.
So, yes, sir.
So of these permits, these requests are coming in, what do you think the breakdown is as a property, maybe folk that own rental property versus homeowners? Because I'm thinking of maybe the fixed income folks who've owned their houses for decades, who that fee could be a problem.
Yeah, it could be.
Where I know a large scope of property owners in Norristown are developers. So
Sure.
how do you that small percentage of people who are being honest, who are doing what you're saying, how do you accommodate that population?
So I honestly didn't look at the data to compare it, to see out of these properties, how many are owner occupied and how many are rentals. From the last meeting, I remember Councilman Perry had questions about, how many permit numbers we have, so I put those numbers together to kind of showcase why this fee schedule needs to be in this type of new proposed schedule method. But once again, even if it's an owner-occupied property, the municipality is still going out to perform a service. So the inspector is going out, we're burning gas, we have IT costs, we have paper costs, we have follow-up, There's a lot of costs that come into that inspection, and I just want to reiterate, any of these fees that we have, I'm not doing it to drum up additional revenue. It's actually to cover the costs that we have right now. Some of these fees haven't been updated in decades, or longer. So we are losing money by doing these services every day. We're not covering our true costs. So that's why we took a strong look at it to kind of actually put together a systematic method to make sure that we are covering our internal costs for these services that we're providing.
My concern is that we have a lot of residents in the town who are not necessarily gonna go out and hire a contractor
Sure.
to do work in their house.
Sure.
It seems like an onerous additional charge, just from what you're talking about, for something that people are gonna try to do on their
Sure.
own.
So,
And,
so for
it's
example,
gonna be, I think what's gonna happen is that either, A, people aren't gonna know about these fees, and B, they're going to try and hide doing work, which
Sure.
is gonna cause a problem.
So-
And I know they do that now primarily because of all of it.
well,
So
we've been,
we have
one thing I can say,
time.
we've been aggressively cracking down for people that are working without permits, whether they're homeowners or rental property owners or contractors. But for example, to put it the easiest way, let's say if a homeowner wants to replace their water heater. Right now, that permit fee is gonna be $99.50. Now, under the same, let's say we use this new proposed method for the fee schedule, now their permit fee is gonna be $129.50. So it's like a $30 increase for a basic permit only.
But
So-
you're still talking about a fee that's over and above the cost of the hot water heater, which is probably bankrupting a lot of people to begin with.
But these fees are being charged throughout the country.
That is
We
correct.
we can't just not charge it. I'm a senior citizen. If I gotta get mine done, I gotta get it done. I understand, trust me, I understand. But it's not like Norristown is doing this, we have to cover our expenses. And one question I asked about the property, well, the valuation of whatever it is going down, we have to cover our expenses. Did we almost go bankrupt a few years back? We have to at least stay equal. And what he's saying is, the charges haven't been looked at to be fair to us as a municipality in decades. So we have to do what we have to do. It's like last year, we didn't want to do the rate increase. We have to do what we have to do.
So for the smallest permit type, it's gonna be a $30 increase. That's all. That's, you're doing your water heater, or you just did something simple, repair or renovation to your home that just needed one inspection, which currently we charge $99.50. It's gonna be $129.50, so a $30 increase. And a $30 increase, if we did it gradually, maybe $1 here, $1 there every other year, it wouldn't be as significant, but a $30 increase overall, comparing, and I can actually have data for that too. So out of these 1,146 permits that were valued under $5,500, there were roughly 480 of them, which were $99.50. So out of those 490 approximate permits, those persons would end up paying $30 more should they do similar work in the future. So it's going to be $30 for the most basic type of project that's going on of an increase. Now for a little bit bigger renovation than that, if it's going to require multiple inspections, that's when that $75 fee will be tacked on for those inspections to cover the municipality's costs.
I think one of the other things, council, keep in mind in terms of, you're already being sensitive to that area. You know, you spend $500,000 in home assistance for folks to get improvements to their homes. You also been participating in that work camp program. Every year it's become available. So, you know, you as a council, and you know, you've exercised funds consistently to address those folks who really are having problems dealing with making improvements in their homes. So, but honestly, you know, ultimately it's going to be a council decision in terms of what the fees are. But Amrita is right. You know, all we're trying to do is, you're going to have a hard decision to make one way or the other by not doing this, because it's always going to come back to how does it get paid for, and it's going to be the taxes or through the fees, one way or the other.
Madam
And
President.
if I could interject, I know more times than often, we're also being compared to our neighboring townships and our neighboring boroughs. And I've mentioned in the past that we don't want to get into a situation where we're always undercharging, because what happens is then there's no true comparisons of the other townships versus the municipality. So if we've been undercharging for decades, and now's the opportunity to actually get it right and to become comparisons amongst our neighboring townships, I mean, what is the harm at this point?
Madam
The
President.
harm is going to be, we're going to get people who, just like Olivia said, who want a fixed income, and it's unfortunate. It's truly unfortunate, you know, so that's the harm, the individuals who feel as though we're, again, increasing unnecessarily,
Everything
but
increases.
everything increases, except your paycheck.
Right,
That's
that's
your
the thing.
No.
So when you
Right.
get people who say that they can't afford these, are we pointing them in the direction of the funding that's available?
Yes.
Or,
Absolutely.
so when people do say that they have a problem coming up with the extra $150 because they need 3 inspections, it's not gonna be, well, that's the rule, we're gonna point them in the
Well,
direction.
it's not gonna be Amrita's job. I mean, we certainly are gonna say, here are the programs that are available
Right.
for the city. And we advertise that, and we take applications for that all the time. And so, you know, when we run across folks who say, listen, I got a problem and I can't afford to do the improvement, we're gonna go to all the resources we have to do it. We're gonna look for all the resources the county has to do, and we're gonna point them to all the resources if the state has them to do it. And we do that. But once you adopt a fee schedule itself, that's the fee schedule. And so we'll exercise everything we can to get them some assistance. But at the end of the day, it won't be that, oh, we get it, we can't charge.
Oh, I'm not
Right.
saying, I'm just saying that when people say they can't pay, we're
And
being
right,
Yes.
and
conscious
that's the
of pointing
thing,
them in the
because,
direction of funding.
you know, something like a water heater is not always a planned renovation.
Sure.
You know, the water
Right.
heater bursts and you're left without water. So what's my house gonna be condemned because I have no hot water? Or am I gonna pay a fee that I can't afford on top of the installation of a hot water heater? So even though we are offering help to somebody, these programs don't always come around. So,
And again, ultimately, it's gonna be a council decision on how do you wanna capture this? Do you wanna capture it from your fund balance? Or do you wanna capture the cost in terms of doing it? There's a cost associated with every service we provide, and that's all we're saying. That there's a cost associated
So
with it.
I think of that landlord who owns multiple properties, who's
I'm
in.
not talking about the landlord, that's the person doing business.
That
I'm
landlord is
talking about
in or
homeowners.
over their heads, they own multiple properties, so when things break, when ceilings collapse,
their
when
problem.
water heaters break, they don't have the money to fix it.
That's
So
their
as you
problem,
say,
that's the cost of
So
doing
the
business.
residents get misplaced, the kids and the tenants get misplaced because, you know, it's unfortunate, but I think of that case scenario.
There's a lot of different scenarios that are very unfortunate, but again, the bottom line is, if we wanna stay afloat, we've gotta do what we have to do. And just continue to point them in the right direction to get help. Point me in the right direction, I need help, serious. You know, we have to point people in the right direction. but we have to, as a municipality, we'd be doing an injustice to the community if we do not take the steps to keep us going afloat.
Madam President, are we entertaining questions from the public?
We will after council
Okay.
feedback, we will.
There was a few raised hands, so I just.
Okay, so they'll have an opportunity to speak.
All right, thank you, Madam President.
You're quite welcome.
Brandon, the next slide, please. Another fee update that we're proposing is, right now, our contractor fee is only $70. We are looking to change that to $100. And that's, once again, to cover the cost of the administrative processing, the keeping on top of them, making sure that their workers' comp insurance that we have on file is not expiring. If it is expiring, sending them the reminder letter, contacting them, hey, we need your new workers' comp insurance. And also for the registration and making sure that all of their credentials are in order. One of the things I want to mention about the contractor licensing is, in the past, Norristown actually used to provide an examination for the trades members. So builders, plumbers, HVAC contractors, and electricians actually had to pass an exam that we provided in order to get a license to do work in town. I'm not sure exactly when that fell off of the books, but currently the ordinance that we have, they really don't need to provide us any type of credentials. Anyone can walk in with a construction van or a truck or a minivan, pay the $70 fee, show us they have workers' comp insurance, and be licensed in Norristown. And we are looking to change that, hopefully part of the comprehensive code update that Mr. Jones and council and all of us we're looking to propose here. In the future, we would like to bring that testing back, or if you can show us a license from Allentown, Reading, Philadelphia, Easton, Pittsburgh, other municipalities where you actually test it. That way we can make sure that if you are working on a homeowner's property, that you're actually qualified to do so. You understand codes, you understand what you're doing, and the homeowners will actually benefit from that. And what it's going to help is it's going to weed out the people that are not qualified to do the work, and they wouldn't be able to get a license. Now this is going to be for commercial projects, which would be considered any building that has 3 or more residential units or is an actually commercial building. The State Attorney General's office has a home improvement contractor license. We can't regulate that under the state law. So if somebody's just doing, siding on the side of a single-family dwelling, we're not going to be requiring those type of contractors to get licensed through us because we can't under the state law. So these would be anyone working on buildings 3 or more units or 3 stories or higher. So the proposed fee is $100, and then we kind of made a phased fee schedule depending on when that contractor comes to Norristown to do the work. What we're seeing a lot is if somebody comes in around October, November, actually we had one earlier this week, somebody is planning to do a project, and when we told them that they have to pay the $80 fee, they said, well, I'll just come back and start the project in January, because why am I going to pay the $80 fee that's for the whole year for just being licensed in Norristown for a month and a half. So that's why we're proposing the staged fee schedule. That way, depending on which quarter of the year you come into Norristown to do work, you're being charged appropriately. The next item is going to be a big one as well. It's for the rental licensing. Right now, our fee is $65 per unit. I'm proposing to raise that to $75 per unit. That's a $10 increase per unit. The reason for that is, once again, to cover the administrative cost of managing these rental units, and also to do the field inspection, the reporting, and the follow-up on these properties. The $75 per unit fee will help cover those operational costs. Right now, our penalty is $60. I'm looking to increase that to $65. That way, it gives the incentive to the rental property owners that the penalty is higher if I don't pay the fee on time. Currently, we have a $30 reinspection fee. I would like to increase that to $50 once again to cover the operational cost and the time it takes us to stay on top of these properties, and the multiple letters, the multiple phone calls, emails, the staff, the time it takes us out in the field to recheck all of the violations. And another item is the $30 no-show fee that we currently have. I would like to raise that to $100. Right now, what happens is a rental property owner will be told, or they would already arrange an inspection with us. We go on to the inspection appointment and they don't show up. Or, so I'm looking to do that for no-show and no entry. It might be a 6-unit building, but they forgot they don't have the key for 1 unit. So we inspected 5 units, but the 6th one, we still haven't inspected. So if you fail to have keys to your building or make the necessary arrangements, you're gonna be penalized for that, for wasting the municipality's time and possibly preventing us to see what's inside that unit, what are the conditions that that tenant is living in. That way we can, because now we can make sure that they have a proper housing to live in. So that $100 fee is to kind of incentivize them to make sure that the day and time the inspection is scheduled, that you're there. Another fee that we are looking to propose that we don't have is for stop work orders and condemnation placards. So anytime we go out there to a property to placard it for working without permits or if it was condemned, we issue a placard, we issue a letter, we do follow up, we do all of the stuff we have to do behind the scenes. And right now there's no mechanism besides when the property owner comes to the counter or if they call us or via email for us to tell them, yes, you can remove the placard. We want to have a formal process that way we can actually capture all of the properties that are condemned or that we do condemn or issue stop work orders and that they're properly taken off of that list. So this fee is going to help cover that program where we're going to be actually issuing letters and follow-ups that you are allowed to take off this placard, updating fire, updating police, and all of that. So that's that fee. And then the last fee proposal is for our plan reviews. Right now it's $70 residential. We would like to make that $75, and $110 for commercial. We would like to make that $125. And this fee only gets used 1% of the time. 99% of the time when we issue permits, we do it according to the value of the construction. This plan review fee schedule is for significantly large projects, big developments, big commercial spaces. That's when this fee gets used to help with the fee schedule to balance out the inspection costs, the admin costs, and then also the actual plan review costs. So this isn't going to get charged for any small project, you know, anyone working on their house, doing an addition to their house. This is for major new home construction, new commercial construction, and that's to also cover our operational costs that we have right now to do these type of services. Yes, Councilman?
No, I think your schedule shows like accountability that hasn't been in place for a long time when it comes to property owners and landlords. There's very few of you guys and so many properties, so it is easy to be taken advantage of. My question is, have you come from a background where these increases and these type of scheduling brings about results?
100%, sir. So, so my first city was with the city of Reading at the codes department, and part of the fee schedule and the new code updates that I'm looking to implement here, some of it I'm taking from learning what I did in Reading, learning what I did in Steelton, and also looking at what other municipalities in Montgomery County and across the region that are similar to our demographics, how are they dealing with the blight? How are they dealing with the property owners that choose not to respond and voluntarily comply with our codes? So definitely, yes, you know, I am using that, but for example, right now this is the fee schedule that we have on the books, and that's all I'm proposing at this time. But part of the upcoming code updates, you know, I'm proposing administrative non-compliance penalties, where if we go for a reinspection, for example, let's say we did an initial inspection January 1, now we're doing a reinspection March 1st, but the property owner still didn't do the necessary repairs at their rental property. They're just gonna wanna pay that $50 reinspection fee again, because why are they gonna wanna spend hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars? They'll just keep paying that $50 to keep getting an additional 45 days. We're gonna put an end to that. We're gonna have administrative non-compliance penalties where the first time we show up and you didn't do the work, $250 fine on top of a reinspection fee. Second time we go back for that reinspection, $500. Third time we have to go back, $1,000. So that's gonna kind of strong arm the real bad property owners into fixing their properties That way the tenants and the residents that are living in those homes have a safe home to live in and occupy in. So that's some of the things that are upcoming in the future, but this is only the proposed items that we currently have on the books that, you know, I can,
One more quick question.
yes, sir.
Now, do these end up in district court if the property owners don't comply or they rack up fees? Does this end up before district court?
So that is, eventually, yes, sir. So for example, in 2018, so far we have about $46,000 of fees that have not been collected. So eventually what's gonna happen is we're gonna send them one final letter that says you were supposed to pay your rental license fees by this time. This is your last warning. We're gonna give you an additional 14 days. If it's not taken care of in 14 days, we're gonna issue a citation. But just because we issue a citation doesn't mean we're gonna get, number one, code compliance, that we're getting into the property to do the inspection. Number two, the judge may just toss the case, or the judge might give a $50 penalty, or the maximum $1,000 penalty. We have no control over that. So the biggest thing is we wanna move kind of away from having to use the DJs to do our code enforcement. We wanna make it so aggressive that the DJ's office is the last resort. Like, once we go there, 100% of the time we get a guilty verdict because the DJ knows we've had 12, 15 different attempts to try to get this property in compliance. We're not here just because somebody didn't do something within the first 30 days like we told them to, that we're using you as a last resort. And internally in-house, we want to be aggressive with making sure that they're being code compliant.
I like that because that's one of our pet peeves here for council, is to make sure that the residents who are renting, that they have decent housing, and the issues that are taking forever to repair.
I agree with you. I mean, a lot of residents are paying very good amount of money to live in these homes, and some of them, you know, they're paying $1,000, $800, $1,500, but the conditions they're living in, they shouldn't have to because they are paying so much money, and the landlords are not providing them a proper service. So that's why right now in our ordinance it says we may inspect you. That's one of the changes that we're doing is every 3 years, every rental property in Norristown is going to be inspected. And if you don't let us in, whether we have to get administrative search warrants or whether we have to apply for your property unlawful, we're gonna be inspecting your property. And it has to be code compliant to make sure that residents are living in a safe home. So that's all I have, and if there were any other questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Thank you. So, is there anything in it? So I'll stand in and do this. As you know, one of the things that we're trying to do now is actually, again, recreation department is an enterprise operation. You know, there's fees, services that are provided. I know in terms of what we have now, in terms of actually use of our park, for instance, that the current structure is under 20 people who want to reserve a place in the park is free. And as I said before, guess what? Every application we get, it's going to be under 20 people, and it ends up being 100 people or whatever. And our police department, fire department, and everybody else is responding, public works, to deal with that. So we want to go away from that whole number count strategy and actually go to a fee proposed based on time. And that's been my experience. I think that's been Erica's experiences as well, is that, you know, you pay for the time you use the space and not for the number of people. There'll be some thresholds in there in terms of the number of people. So for instance, if you're gonna have an event that's gonna be constitute 100 people, that's an event. That's just not a space rental. So we'll have requirements in terms of requiring security. We're gonna require, as we do now for insurance, for those kind of events, so that we make sure that the municipality is protected when we allow folks to do events on our property now. We make sure that they have property and liability insurance that we're named as a covered in there, so that we, and the minimum is $1 million that we can get recovered. So we have basically going away from that number count schedule, going to between 1 and 4 hours. Residents will pay an $85 fee to use it, non-residents $170, and that'd be a $25 deposit to do it for 1 to 4 hours. For 5 hours to 8 hours, $185 and $340 with a $50 deposit to do it. And one of the things is we want to make sure that, because what we found is there are some entities, some not even related to Norristown at all, that have been just kind of coming and taking our parks and bringing their groups over there and having events in our parks and charging for events in our parks. And as you know, Council, you can't charge for an event on a municipal park unless this council has given authorization for that to do so. So one of the things we want to do is make sure that if any organization, regardless, if we find that they're holding events in our parks and charging for a park and have not gone through the proper permitting process, that we'll double the maximum fee regardless of whether they're in town or out of town. We want to make sure that we double the fee to recoup that, because what we find again is we have to clean it up, we have to take care of the trash, we have to make sure it's in our parks are in order for the next user. And we know over the course of this last year, we actually have had to give refunds from folks who didn't take care of the park as they had agreed to do so, and so folks who were following them didn't have an opportunity to do the event or take advantage of the reservation that they had, and we think that'll help them.
I have a question.
Certainly.
How's this going to be advertised besides on your website?
It's gonna be advertised, we're gonna have a reading schedule, we're gonna have it on our website, it's gonna be in our finance department, because everybody's, fees are gonna come through, primarily through the finance department. It's gonna be directed to go there, go to our website, et cetera. So we're gonna have it at the rec department as well. So there'll be multiple avenues for what happens. We're probably also doing an advertisement in the papers or something along the lines of, fees have changed. Here's where you need to go to make sure you recognize what the new fees are.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
What's that little thing outside called?
That electronic board?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Perhaps maybe in the springtime, check out our new fee schedule for the parks.
Oh, absolutely.
Also, on our little TV monitor here.
Oh, it is. And on our television.
Okay.
And on our television.
So there's gonna be people say, I didn't know.
Right, and as a matter of fact, one of the
I've been
things,
doing this for years.
we're working on a similar electronic board sign for outside the rec department.
Okay.
So it'll be
Good.
also advertised over there as well on that board. So. All right.
Question, Graham. How are you gonna know who's a resident versus non-resident?
They're gonna show proof of residency. If you got something with a Norristown address on it, you'll be fine. That has your name, and you'll be fine.
So if I live in Pottstown, but my cousin lives in Norristown, and I wanna have an event, I'm gonna send my cousin.
Well, yeah, and if you're gonna have that event, whether it's you or your cousin, we're not gonna do background checks and all of that, but if you're gonna have an event, there's still gonna be the requirement event, you're gonna have the insurance. I'm telling you, the insurance requirement chases so many folks away who aren't trying to be legitimate in the first place. But as long as, we'll do our due diligence to the point that it makes sense to do our due diligence. What we want is who signed their name that's gonna be accountable. And so at the end of that accountability, when we're sitting in court or wherever we're sitting, I don't care if Pookie got you to sign a form or anybody else, you gotta be responsible. You signed your name, and you signed your name too. So, I'm sorry, it's getting late, I'm sorry. All right, gymnasium. So one of the things we're doing, as you know, the renovations continue to go over there. So we're also getting away, going to an hour usage for the gymnasium. And that would be residents, 1 to 4 hours, you can have it for $100, non-residents, $150, nonprofits, organization, for-profit and non-profit organization fees, and then we have additional fees for 5 to 8 hours. There are breakout rooms that we're developing in there, and one of the things we know, that during the course of the day, when kids are in school or whatever, there are opportunities for folks to have meetings, et cetera, and meeting space for outside organizations is kind of hard to find in town. So we create that. It's going to create another revenue stream to help offset the costs of operating a new facility. We also have audiovisual equipment available for use at the facility as well. So we want to charge an AV fee of $10 per person for whatever the event is going to use to offset the costs of running that and using that equipment, and ultimately we have to do replacements, repairs, etc.
So I have a question.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
say $10 per person, is that like per microphone or?
No, so if you have an event that's going to, well, if you have a user, a user, and we have multiple computers, we're going to have multiple, so that specific type, so if we got people and say, I want to use 10 of your computers, well, we're going to have that, well, $10 per person to use those computers. Mhm. All right, so that's what we're recommending in terms of the recreation department. Okay, so other cost savings measures that we're looking at is around special events that we utilize. And we know that this past 4th of July is that the chamber did a great job of handling our 4th of July operations. And so we've been looking at the cost of everything that we've been doing. It's basically some of the things that we've been, and I'm not sure why we're saying this is savings, because did this reduce what we did before?
We're looking at cutting the cost for these.
Okay, yeah. So one of the things that we know, some of the uses of some of these things like performers, et cetera, kind of been baked into the same folks for the same time all year long. We're going to be a lot more discerning about that. So we know it's about $26,000 worth of cost overall, and we're going to kind of look to that to see what we can do. We know not only just even for 4th of July, but for instance, one of the things we know in terms of the use of our vending services, our concession, it's been a cost loser forever. And now that you've got a food truck ordinance in place, we're like, well, why are we spending money where we're losing money? Because we're not making anything near what we've been expending. So we're looking to kind of discount that and actually use the food truck ordinance to have vendors support events we have outside. Because right now we compete with vendors because of the food truck ordinance anyway. And so those are kind of some of the things that we're looking at. I know we're going to probably change fireworks vendors. I don't know that it'll necessarily be cheaper than this.
I have a question. In terms of the vendors, say for example on the 4th of July, or I think in the past when they had the, I forget what you called it, the August event down at the park. And I remember there was some type of issue with people wanting to sell things in the parks. So can you explain when that is permitted?
Absolutely. Well, now we have food truck.
I'm not talking about
No,
just
food trucks.
food,
Now,
but
so
anything.
people selling things in the park, it's not permitted unless council says it's permitted. Now, I will 100% admit, I know, that's part of the hate Crandall movement is that you can't do that kind of stuff and just do it because you choose to do it, because it's liability to us. So I know we push people toward, no, you can't sell, you can't make money on public facilities unless council has deemed that so. So if it's happening and we don't know about it, we address it. I remember a couple of 4th of Julys ago when I knew it was happening at Elmwood Park, and I'm personally walking around, do you have a permit to do this? And it's like, no, I really didn't, you know, kind of shake hand deals. I was like, no. You know, and the first time I really kind of got into it is once you all had done an authorization that food trucks could sell, and we were getting proceeds from that authorization of them selling. We weren't getting proceeds from other folks who were trying to do it. And I said, no, I mean, and we welcomed and had invited everybody to be a part of that process, and a few folks chose not to do it and wanted to sell anyway, and we stopped it.
So for special events like 4th of July and
Mhm.
festivals, if you have folks who want to sell merchandise, could we create some type of vendor license for a specific
There is one.
day?
There is one. It's just, and we had a version of vendor license. There were people who just did not want to do it, and we invited them, get a license, and you know, we'll let you sell. Council has approved food trucks out there. We'll let you sell. Some folks just didn't want to do that, and so those folks, no, I'm not going to have these other folks out here paying into the system. And you choose to, like, I'm gonna do it because you wanna do it. No, so that's the only way. We got a vendor license now, and if you wanna sell, you can sell. It's just follow the process.
So that process has been in place for how long? For someone to sell items, you know, whether it
Like
be
maybe
balloons
t-shirts
or
or
t-shirts or.
balloons.
Yeah, I mean,
What I'm saying is that it wasn't something that was ever enforced for a long time.
you're right.
All of a
You're right,
sudden-
and so again, for me, it wasn't about targeting whether or not it was enforced, but at the end of the day, the liability for whatever happens comes back to the folks sitting around this table. And so, you know, if for instance,
I saw
there
that
was
bad
nothing
balloon,
in place.
And you're not happy with this bad balloon I sold you, and you punched me in the face.
Happy with the bad balloon, if there was a sandwich attached and I got salmonella, you allowed me to do that on your property, they're gonna go to you first because you're the biggest dollar in the entity. So, our efforts has always been about protect the municipality and ultimately the citizens, because it's taxpayer dollars that end up being affected by not regulating. So that's what.
Now, if a vendor wants to set up a hamburger joint at the park during, let's say someone puts down a deposit
Mhm.
for a 4-hour event, and a couple people say, oh, I want to sell hot dogs and hamburgers.
We're not gonna let you come and lay a table out there and sell hot dogs and hamburgers, because that's counter to your food, your food truck ordinance. Because a part of what we're doing is making sure that they got health department and safety issues are covered in doing
They
it.
sure
So
used to do that. I sure bought some.
I'm sure. I mean, I saw it, and I think that's a liability.
So we have something on the books in public that if someone wants to come out and fry